So, we know the difference between men and women in terms of polarity now. The black and white of positive and negative, of full and of empty. In summary, man is positively polarized and pushing outwards on the physical and mental levels of consciousness. Man is negative and pulling inwards on the emotional and inspirational levels. Woman is positive and pushing outwards on the emotional and inspirational level, and pulling inwards or negative on the mental and physical level. As you can see, the two are like a four-part magnet, clicking together perfectly, as if solving a puzzle or making whole a half. It is not just a spectrum of feminine to masculine. There are four polarities in action, on each level of consciousness, from body to will. Now, I'm sure you're wondering how there could possibly be more complexities regarding the difference in genders. But there is one level above the four spectrums of polarity, which is similar to traditional thought on the matter. Balance between the poles is where all good resides, and the extremities of the poles can be quite disharmonic. This is why the sexes balance each other, right? Well, there is something we haven't considered yet, and is the reason why men have been dominant on the planet for most of history. We need to compare the natural polarities of the four levels of consciousness, or the universal nature of these poles, to each gender's relative polarity. Then, we will reach a conclusion derived from what I like to call superpolarity. Okay, to get started, the physical in general is the most negative state of consciousness. Its essential lack of consciousness pulls higher polarities to it. For example, people are inspired to act by material desires. This is the physical pulling will into itself. This could also be seen as a person literally willing their body into action. You see, first comes will and the thought of what to do, happening very close to the same time, and then the action or movement of the body itself. A good example is seeing a restaurant with a kind of food you really like. This excites your will to eat, which then creates a thought. Thought falling from will, the thought to walk in there and sit down. The thought, of course, leads to the physical, and you physically go there and eat at the restaurant. Remember, the negative pulls in and the positive pushes out. The will is the force that flings thought into action and satiates itself as it puts its energy into the physical. Will makes the physical happen, but without either, both would be nothing. Okay, so we understand the basic poles here. Next, we have the falling and rising midpoints. Thought is also negative because it brings will to the physical. Thought must happen in order for an action to be completed. It is the falling midpoint. Thought usually revolves around a goal. The goal is sent from will, but thought must consider the physical, or reality in general, to bring about the goal. Without thought, a restaurant-bound individual would just stand there blankly with the want for food but no mode to get there. Therefore, thought pulls will into the physical. Next, we have the rising midpoint, which is emotion. So, after you have your meal, doing the action, you will decide if it was good or not. If it was delicious, you'll shoot a good feeling emotion upwards into will from the physical. Then, you are likely to have the will to come to that restaurant again. Although, if the food is bad, you will shoot a bad feeling into will and will be unlikely to have the will to come again. Do you see the cycle here? It is physical to emotion, to will, then to thought, then back to physical, then to emotion, then to will. then to thought, and then to physical. This is the mode by which we move, the cycle of our consciousness. Now, it should be noted that technically, thought and emotion in their purest form are non-polarized, being midpoints, but the direction toward the consistent pole is why they have a polarity. They are moving downwards or upwards. Anyhow, will and emotion are positive forms of consciousness, and thought and physical or negative forms of consciousness. Okay, so what does this have to do with men and women? Well, what direction does each gender's polarity compare to the universal natural polarity? For will and emotion, which are positive polarities, man is polarized negatively, and women are polarized positively. Women are polarized in the same direction as the natural flow, and men are polarized against it. For physical and mental polarities, which are negative by nature, man is polarized positively against the natural flow, and women are polarized negatively with the natural flow. What does this mean? This is now where superpolarity comes in, which is essentially balance versus the extremes. You may remember from the first video that the extremes lie farthest from the source, while balance imitates the source of everything, or God, whatever you'd like to call it. Anyways, the source is the interaction between nothingness and infinity. It is both as one, and creates all possibility. Infinity is the ultimate full principle or positive pole, and nothingness is the ultimate empty principle or negative pole. Infinity by itself has no end and therefore cannot be differentiated into separate forms. Nothingness is, well, nothingness. It is endless. Therefore, only together can they make reality. Okay, so there is this ultimate source, probably what is causing the quantum fluctuations in empty space, but that is beside the point. The superpolarity is the source point versus non-source. The source point is somehow simultaneously nothing and infinity. And not just nothingness and infinity canceling each other out into some in-between neutral thing. It literally is the two at the same time. Therefore, the non-source is that which comes from source, which is polarity itself. The natural flow of the source is entropy. Or in other words, from unity into separation, from unity into polarizations. This is so that actual things can be created, at least in our dimension of duality. Now, men, in their relative polarities, are moving against the natural flow of the universe, and women are moving with it. If the natural flow of the universe is entropy, or becoming separate, then by this logic, women are more polarized, farther from balance. Women are fuller of what is already full and emptier of what is already empty. Because this path is natural, it is a path of ease. For example, in physical negative, it is easier to do less physically. In thought negative, it is easier to think less. In emotion positive, it is easier to let yourself feel all your emotions. And in will positive, it is of course easier to have many desires. Men, on the other hand, through going against the natural poles, bring themselves closer to the source, closer to creation. This is where the difference is. So going towards source is a path of difficulty, as it is against the natural flow of entropy. For example, in physical positive, it is harder to do more physically. In thought positive, it is harder to think more. In emotion negative, it is harder to limit your emotions. And in will negative, it is harder to limit yourself to only a few desires. So, in moving against the universe, men gain great ability but through great cost. They are closer to creation, and therefore are the ones who have created nearly everything throughout history, including civilization, the arts, most modern technology, and even a lot of women's fashion, ironically. Through thinking and doing more, and feeling and desiring less, men can accomplish much, but through the cost of suffering, putting their wants and feelings aside in order to accomplish objectives. This is why men have been dominant throughout nearly all of history. Women, moving with the universe, are farther from source, but closer to nature, the nature of the universe. Or, in other words, they are closer to the natural flow of the universe. And on our planet, that is nature. Now, because of this, they gain grace. They flow much more easily and are blessed by nature in having a life of ease. In an everyday example, women are much better in a social situation because they don't try to control the situation, they simply flow with their emotions. Although in gaining this grace and ease of life comes the cost of having less power than men. In short, women are agents of entropy and men are agents of creation, again relative to each other. Men, through taking responsibility and limiting their own souls, they can create and accomplish great tasks, but lose out on the freedom of being. Women are the opposite, losing out on power and competence, in return gaining the grace of nature and freedom to be. To put it simply, in a meme-like form, men are human doings, not human beings, and women are human beings. Men are far better at doing quite literally everything, but women are far better at existing and just being. Women are more polarized and men are more balanced. Men are on a stiff and difficult path, but one of power. Women are on a graceful, flowing, and easy path, but one of weakness. Please remember, though, that this is all relative. Some women can actually be closer to source than a man, and some men are closer to nature than women. It's all relative, though these exceptions are very rare. Also, there could be a more advanced alien race whose women are closer to source than our men. Species are also relative to each other. Lastly, it is important to know that the most superior human can use both the stiff masculine energy and the flowing free feminine energy. This person is not balanced between the two because that would just be a more feminine man or a more masculine woman. No, this person is able to use the two forces in appropriate timing, flowing as the yin in reaction, and when the chance allows, striking as yang.